Welcome to the 30-minute hour. It's the personal development podcast for the seven-figure entrepreneur who's looking to level up and become unstoppable. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, your procrastination prevention partner, and I've conducted over 28,000 coaching sessions with seven-figure entrepreneurs. Joining me as always, you know him as the super CEO, the business strategy extraordinaire, and all-around good guy, Ted Fells.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
It certainly is. These Mondays are going by fast. So it's a happy Monday for another reason, Ted. Here's why. Let me share that with you. Because we're going to find out the biggest reason that your team is underperforming. We're going to get to the bottom of that because, Ted, somebody is watching this right now. Like, I just can't put my hands around it. I've got the business plan. I've done the whiteboarding, but the results aren't where I want them to be. We may have solved this problem for you. That's right. We're going to find out today the biggest reason your team is underperforming. And our guest today is an expert who can help us to get to the bottom of this. He's the founder of Ascent Management Consulting. And like I say, he's a recognized expert in team and business unit turnarounds. He is the creator of the 90-day turnaround, a unique program for building great leaders and transforming any group into a highly engaged, high-performing team in just 90 days.
Wow.
Exactly. Please join me in welcoming to the 30-minute hour, Kevin Herring.
How are you doing? Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Welcome to the show. All right. We could have made a great show just out of what we were talking about backstage. Like he and I were on the same, Ted, this is one of those times we had to cut it off. Like, we got to save the good material for the actual show.
That's right.
So, yeah, everybody buckle your seatbelt. He's got a lot of good knowledge. But I did want to give everybody just kind of the backstory. So I'm just curious, like, what was the vision you had back when you were an undergraduate at the University of Minnesota? Like, what vision for your career did you have back in those days?
It's funny. Some people always know they're going to be a police officer. Some people know they're going to be a teacher, and I don't know that when I was young, I had any clue about that sort of thing. But when I was an undergraduate early on, I knew I was going to do consulting. And I'll tell you why. I actually had a couple of interesting experiences, but one in particular was early in my undergraduate program. One summer, I worked for a food dehydrator company on the assembly line. Great job. You know how intellectually stimulating that job can be. But it was a very diverse group of people. And I mean, really diverse. I mean, we had people who were Southeast Asian refugees coming into the country, just trying to get a new life started. Some could speak virtually no English. It had to have somebody else, one of the others who spoke better English, translate for them. There were middle-aged couples. There were a lot of students like me, but a very diverse group of people. And I stumbled into this team where there was an absentee manager, nobody leading the place. The team on the assembly line had, on their own, began setting goals on about a weekly or biweekly basis for production. And we would meet those goals. We would beat them. We would set new goals and beat them. We were setting new production records throughout the entire summer on a regular basis. And there was no informal leader that sort of stepped up and said, hey, let's all do this. It just sort of happened. It was fascinating. And I learned so much from that experience. It was an opportunity to really study what it is that motivates people. What is it that gets people to be passionate about the work, to produce at high levels and work together effectively. Just a wonderful experience. And that really solidified for me that I wanted to be able to understand that at a deeper level and help others build that kind of work environment So early on, I knew where I wanted to go. I may not have always been that clear about how I was going to get there, but I loved business. I loved uh, helping people in workplaces and learning about leadership and how to be a good leader. And so that really kind of drove my interest in the courses I took, and the direction I went for graduate school.
That's interesting that because there's
Mhm.
not a lot of people that in college are thinking I'm going to be a consultant.
Yeah.
They're just not thinking along those lines. But since you had that clarity, so if you could go back and be a mentor to that undergraduate version of yourself, what advice would you give your younger self?
Boy, I'd give myself a lot of advice. One thing I think I would go back and tell myself if I were mentoring myself, I'd say, Kevin, look, you have to be patient. You
Mm,
can't have it all right now. You've got to develop yourself. You've got a lot to learn. And so when I finished graduate school, I went in to work for a consulting firm for a short period, and then I was recruited to come work in industry. But I had a great experience in that short time I worked for that consulting firm. It was the one of the partners was a mentor to me. It was wonderful, but I recognized that, and he recognized that I needed some real world experience, not just the experience of the assembly line and things like that, but I needed to get into a company and really kind of learn the ropes. And so I would say, look, Kevin, I know you want to do consulting. Keep that vision alive, but understand that there are some foundational experiences you need to have to help you be successful with that. So when you get through school, apply for jobs that will help you build that foundational experience. Get in house, get inside of a company, and build your skills. And tell them that you're looking to learn a lot of different things, and you want to have exposure to a lot of different areas of the organization, and to build a lot of different skill sets. Do that and spend a lot of time with the frontline employees. Get on the shop floor, which I actually did, and really enjoyed that. But learn the ropes, and then after you've had some experience, keep sort of growing and building, and look for your consulting opportunities later in your career instead of trying to make it happen too quickly. Um, I ended up that ended up happening to me anyway, but because of my impatience, I made some mistakes, and sometimes lost opportunities I otherwise could have had.
mm.
But yeah, I teach myself to make that a longer term goal, consulting a longer term goal, not a shorter term one.
It's interesting how patience is so critical to success. And Ted and I have talked about this before. It's I think you have to have what's called aggressive patience,
Hmm.
right? Where you have to have a sense of urgency. You have to move at a certain pace, but at the same time, you have to recognize that it takes time, and you have to
Yeah,
recognize that there's a process that's necessary for you to get to where you want to go. That the
that's a great
that's the
point.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are building blocks, and you can't just
right.
jump to the top without having the foundation laid.
Yeah, and I think it's about mastering this art of delayed gratification as well. That
Hmm.
that factors into that. But no, that's good. That's a great answer to that question, by the way, because that applies to some folks that are watching us right now. So tell us, you're the founder of Ascent Management Consulting. Right? Like, who's your ideal client, and how do you help them?
Any leader wants to be a great leader. Any team that wants to be a great team. If a leader's got a team that's struggling, that really has some difficulties, can't seem to work well together, working in silos, they're maybe bickering a lot, they're they're not collaborating, they may be dysfunctional. That's a team we can help. If we have a hardworking team that works well together, that are performing pretty well, but we need to get them to a new level. We don't have a lot of money to pour into the organization. We need to make better use of the resources we have. That's a great one. We can work with them, and we can help them take their performance to a much higher level, because there's so much left on the table that in every organization, in every team, that anybody who wants to take their work group, their engagement and their performance to a new level, we can help them do that and get tremendous results as a consequence of that work.
So I'm just trying to understand. So somebody has a company and they're saying, hey, you know what? I've got this goal and I'm not hitting the goal. That's when they call you to say, hey, you know, I need you to help me to figure out what's going on with my team or we're not hitting the goal?
Absolutely. And, you know, for most of our existence as a company, that we've focused mainly on in-person work. We'd go into an organization, we'd contract with people for the work. We'd go in, collect data, we'd analyze it, we'd find root cause. Sometimes there were quality problems that people couldn't seem to resolve. Sometimes there were just productivity problems. Sometimes customer service problems. And we'd find the root cause of the problem, and it almost always has something to do with the system that people are working that's getting in the way. And so we'd find out how to fix the system to enable people to be able to do what they're trying to do to be successful, and we'd fix it. And we had great results with that, using a lot of the same principles that we're using today in our 90-day turnaround. Which is that now we're taking those same principles and those same practices that we've used to engage people, and we're transferring them to the team itself, to the leader in the team, so they can do it for themselves and taking them down that path.
So I mean, what's an example of like a system that you see that just doesn't work, that's really holding people back?
Yeah. So for instance, if you have, well, let me just give you a real life example. We had one leader who was frustrated because his machinists were developing these parts. These are pump parts, so it's a machine shop, and they're creating the casings. They're machining the shaft that turns the impeller and so on, and then they would ship it over to another facility about 5 miles away, where they would coat it with a rubber coating to try to protect it from corrosion, because these things were used in very corrosive environments. And the parts then would get shipped over to the assembly area, another 5 miles away. They'd put them together, send them to the test facility. They'd run tests on it, and they'd have all this vibration. And it was driving them crazy. They said and they'd go back to the machine and say, "Don't you guys balance these things? You know, what are you doing?" And of course, the machinists were upset. They were offended because they had a lot of pride in their workmanship, and they didn't like being accused of not doing their jobs properly. And they assured everybody, "No, we know what we're doing. We're balancing these things. They're precision balanced when we ship them off to be coated." And so I suggested we sort of get everybody in the same room, and I call it the system. Again, it's what is the system for getting the work done? What are the processes? What has to happen for things to come together and get built? So who are those that are involved in those processes? And I brought them all together, and I said, let's talk about what's going on. And so we educated each other about the different parts of the system, how the technical system works, right? And I'll tell you, it was funny when the people that applied the rubber to the parts heard from the machinists that they were precision balancing these things and then shipping them back to them. A light bulb went on, and they're saying, first of all, you mean we're building pumps? They had no idea that's what they were building. They just had a part that they coated. They didn't even know what they were building. So first of all, we build pumps. Wow, didn't know that. That's fascinating. Right? So that was the first light bulb that went on. The next light bulb that went on was, oh, you mean when we put that shaft on a forklift and we drive across the bumpy shop floor and it bounces off and hits the floor and bounces across the floor, that's a bad thing. And it kind of knocks it out of balance. You know, that's a really bad thing. You know, the machinists about fall off their chair when they hear that. And so, you know, all these light bulbs go on. People suddenly start understanding the whole system, or more of the whole system, not just a little piece that they've been given. And so now we find that we bring the system together, and we find out what's wrong in this system that's causing these problems. Well, one of the biggest problems is a lack of business literacy. We're not educating people about the process, about the parts, about the product, and how all these things have to work together to produce a sellable product, right? So that's what I talk about. When we talk about the system, it's how people, the knowledge they have, how they work together, how the leader works with them. Does the leader give them opportunities to come together to have those conversations? Does the leader let them apply their expertise to the work? Or does the leader tell them every little step that they need to take and how to take it? Do they micromanage them to death? So that's a system people work in. And we find, interestingly, that demotivation is a learned response. People go to work and they have expectations about what they're going to experience at work. And so they go to work, especially if it's a new job, a new boss, they go in thinking that they're going to get support to do the work the way they need to apply their expertise. They're going to get support to do that. They're going to get decision-making authority. They're going to have access to the resources they need to do the work. They're going to get to control those resources however they need to be successful. People are going to work together. They're going to collaborate. There's just all these expectations that people have. And what happens? Little by little, they find those expectations unmet, right? They get discouraged. They get disappointed. They find their boss really doesn't support them at all. Maybe the boss, when something goes wrong, throws them under the bus. Maybe others, everybody's working in silos and they're not really cooperating with each other or collaborating together. Maybe they're competing for resources and attention to get the next promotion or raise. And as those things happen, pretty soon they become more and more demotivated, right? And so they learn to be demotivated because of their experience. That's what the system does to people. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have is people generally don't work in a motivating environment.
Now, you said something that I want to go back to. You said demotivation is a learned response, because there's a school of thought out here, Kevin, that some people just don't want to work. They just, they're just lazy. They're just trying to take a shortcut. You're saying that this demotivation thing is a learned response.
Absolutely. And that came from some research years ago from Kim Cameron and Dave Wetton from University of Michigan. And Dave was at probably Brigham Young maybe at the time. But my point is that sure, there are people who are not very self-motivated. I mean, let's be realistic. But let's face it. Most people are self-motivated. They're inherently self-motivated. Most people want to have a sense of contribution at work, a sense of satisfaction for what they've accomplished and done during the day. Nobody wants to walk out of there feeling like they've just wasted their entire day and been miserable in the process, right? That's just not a good, healthy environment. People don't want to be in that environment. They're generally self-motivated. And the challenge for most leaders is that they have a stance about people. And those who recognize the inherent self-motivation in people tend to be lower control and higher trust leaders. On the other end of the scale, you have people who just look at people as being generally unmotivated. And everything to them is a skill versus will equation. Either they have the skill or they don't. If they got the skill and they're not doing it, then they're not self-motivated. And those people don't trust people to do the work. They don't think they're dependable. They don't think they're able to get themselves going and doing the work. And so they're high control because they feel like they've got to get people up and moving and doing something. And they're also low trust. Well, think about how motivated you would be in an environment where you're working with a leader who is high control, low trust, gonna try to manipulate you to do the work a certain way, or just to do the work. That kind of leader is typically a micromanager, often very difficult to work with, and you don't really have that sense of autonomy that you need to bring your whole self to the work and to feel satisfaction for what you've created each day. So what happens? You get demotivated. And I think that's one of the important things for for leaders to understand is first confront their stance. Do they understand? Do they believe that people are self-motivated or not? Because if they don't think they are, they're never going to build a high-performing team, because they're going to keep operating in a high control, low trust environment. That's the workplace that people will be working in. That's their system that they work in. That's what Ed Deming used to say. I think it's 80-85% of failures are in the system, not the individual. That's been validated thousands of times for me. It's the system that fails the person, not the person that fails the system. And a good leader will rarely have a failure in terms of their staff. They will rarely have a failure. Sure, it'll happen. I've had to fire some people, very rarely. And I think that's the ticket for most leaders, is to understand, if you want.
Looks like we got a Wi-Fi freeze with Kevin. All right. So while he's frozen. So Ted, one of the things I was going to bring you in. You're a high trust leader. Just I've seen you interact with your company. I mean, talk to that, because you seem to, people are motivated to do those extra things, and you seem to have a high level of engagement. Let's talk about that.
I mean, I really just try to. My thing is to try to make people want to do what I
lost you for a minute.
Okay, yeah. So Kevin's back. So Ted is talking. Ted's a high trust leader, and he's talking about kind of his philosophy, kind of going along the lines of our flow here. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, Kevin, I try to make people want to do what I need them to do. Right? I try to make them want to do it. Right. So if I can connect with them, I can get their buy-in. If I can make it collaborative, and then I think that, okay, we're all on the same page with this. We all see this as the way forward. If I can make them want to do it, what I need them to do, then that's the, that's the win. That's the win there. They're doing it because they want to do it. They're not doing it because I'm telling them to do it.
Absolutely. Ted, that's a great comment, because it's the difference between commitment and compliance. Mm-hmm. If people are doing it because they have to do it, that's a compliance mentality. You don't get high performance out of compliance. You only get high performance out of commitment and passion, where people really want to make a difference. They want to do something meaningful. They want to have some meaning and purpose in what they're doing. That I worked when I was another time I was in college. I worked at a precious metals company, and it was really interesting. But we had bought a bank, and we were moving things into the bank and setting up shop in this new location. And there was this safe in the basement of the bank, movable, but let me tell you, it weighed a lot. And so there were about four of us who were told to move the safe up 2 flights of stairs to a higher floor. And it took us probably an hour and a half of backbreaking work to get that thing up the stairs. So we get this thing up there, and there was a woman who was a manager up there in this area who says, "That doesn't belong up here. That belongs downstairs." And I said, "You got to be kidding. You know what it took to get this thing up here?" She says, "You need to take it down. That's where it goes." I said, "Are you serious about that?" She said, "I'm dead serious. Take it down." Okay. So we went step by step. We worked that thing down. We get down to the bottom of the stairs, and guess what happens? You can see this coming, right? The manager down there says, "Who told you to bring that back down here?" Right? So he directs us to take it back up. He says, "Ignore what anyone else says. It's my decision. You take it up." Okay. So we spend the next hour and a half lugging that thing back up, step by step, up 2 flights up to that next level. And of course, she shows up again, this manager, who tells us, "No, that's going down. That's not staying up here." And one of the guys that was with me started complaining about it. And she said, "What are you complaining about? At least you've got a job. You're getting paid to do it." He said, "Who wants to get paid to waste time?" He said, "I don't want to sit here and waste my whole day lugging this thing up and down for nothing. Give me something productive to do." And
Wow.
I think that, all of us want to feel like we're doing something productive. You know, I don't have to be in a profession where I'm saving a life every day to be doing something meaningful. Although that would certainly be meaningful, right? But I could, if I work in a cracker factory, can I not find some sense of meaning and purpose in my job? Sure, I can. Sure, I can. If I understand the stakes, I understand what's important, and I understand the business. I'm literate about the business, and my boss gives me the support, like Ted, what you were saying, lets me use my abilities to make things better, to really produce, to work with others around me with like-minded goals. If we can work together, we can create something just like we did on that assembly line, which is not the most exciting job in the world. But it was an interesting experience. I didn't mind coming to work every day. I mean, I didn't want to do it for 30 years, but but I didn't mind it. It was a pretty good place to work. I mean, we were accomplishing something meaningful every single day, and you could see it. It was tangible. And I felt pretty good about that. And everybody on the line felt pretty good about that. And nobody patted us on the back. Nobody gave us a bonus. I don't think anybody in the front office even knew. I don't know who kept track of production, but far as I could tell, nobody had any clue what we were doing back there. It was kind of funny.
No, that's awesome. So I want to talk about this 90-day turnaround.
Yeah.
This is fascinating to me. So you created this 90-day turnaround program. So please explain how exactly this works.
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, we go into companies. We get a lot of frantic calls from companies who say we have a big problem. We got a quality problem. We've tried everything. We've brought in some robotics and things to fix it, and we still have problems. Clearly it's human error. There's a person element here that's getting in the way. So we go on, we collect the data, we'd analyze it and find the root cause, and then come up with a solution to fix it. Well, we found that in the process, most of the things, as I mentioned before, had to do with the system, had to do with the environment, the workplace that people were working in, the rules, the way they were managed, the expectations, and all those sorts of things. And when we fixed those things, it usually only took about 90 days to do it, and we started getting great results. We could turn around the team or a small business unit in a very short period of time. And 90 days was about the time that it took. And so I always wanted to be able to transfer our company expertise to our clients. And we always tried to do that. But I wanted to take that a step further and really build the capacity of more teams, more leaders to be able to do this themselves in their own organizations. And that's what kind of inspired this. And so we decided that we would take our expertise and we would structure it and streamline it in a way that any leader, any work team could create great results by just following our 90-day process. And so what we do is we'll take either just the leaders, we'll have groups of leaders that will go through, or the entire teams, which is really ideal. And we'll take the team through a 90-day process where we have online, we have supporting materials, we have videos and tasks that they perform every week or two, following a series of steps we call the 6 C's of engagement, where they apply the theory, the ideas, the concepts in real time in their organization so they get the results as they're going through the process. We coach them twice a month as a team or in group coaching settings. And then we have one-on-one with the leaders every month through the process. And by the end, we guarantee that not only will they have a more highly engaged team, but they're going to have measurable improvement in their results.
Okay. Oh, that's good. I mean, the 90-day turnaround. And okay, I think we've hit on this already, but I'd like to clarify this just for the folks that are watching us or listening to us right now. What do you see as the biggest reason that teams underperform? If you could just sum it up to one thing, what's the big reason that these teams are underperforming?
Well, the Gallup organizations laid it out pretty clearly for us. It's engagement. It's lack of engagement. Highly engaged teams have I believe it's 22% higher productivity, 21% higher profit on average. That's on average. We find our numbers are actually higher than that. We find much higher productivity results from highly engaged teams once we do that turnaround. But it's engagement, and if only 15 to 30 some percent, depending on the study that you look at, Gallup's gets a little higher than the others. But even if you have a third of the workforce is coming to work engaged, that's horrible. That's a best case scenario. And I mean, it doesn't get much worse, does it? That's just awful. And so most of the people come to work disengaged, demotivated, going through the motions, just want to get through the day, want to get home and do something more productive. And that's just a recipe for disaster. And so you know that in almost every company, almost in every team, there's money being left on the table because people are in compliance mode. They're not committed. They're not passionate. They're not working well together or as well together as they could. And so that's what we find. Engagement is the key. And who is most responsible for creating an engaging workplace? It's the leadership. Absolutely the leadership. They create the system that people work in. So you either have a highly engaging system, or you have a disengaging system. So you have to go back to what Ed Deming said and look at the system. What is it about your leadership? How you're working with your team? What kind of environment you're creating for them that is holding them back? And when you find those root causes, when you make the positive changes, it's amazing what can happen. You just unleash what people already have that they want to be able to use.
Yeah, that's interesting. So businesses that I've worked with and we've kind of dug into engagement, the most common issue that employees had was they didn't feel that they were being recognized for a job well done, or they were being acknowledged. That's consistent. It was getting to a point I could guess what the number one issue everybody would have, and I would talk to the CEO, and they swear up and down that they're acknowledging, and they do the employee of the month, and they stand up and cheer. Can you talk about that? I mean, and maybe you see this in your work as well, that that's a
Absolutely.
common issue.
Absolutely. I think people look too much at the simple things, or I should say the easy things, not necessarily the things that are tangible. And so they think, well, if we throw a gift card at somebody once in a while, they'll feel appreciated. Mm-hmm. And that's really not what people are looking for. Now, they may like having the gift card, but they really just want to know that people recognize that they're working hard, they're trying to do the right things for the business. They're trying to accomplish things that help the business to be more profitable, and they're appreciated. That people recognize their contribution, and that's more than a gift card from time to time, or a group meeting where people clap and so on. It's a day-to-day kind of thing. A leader should do that, and I've spoken to leaders sometimes where they say, "Well, I don't want to be insincere in trying to come up with a thank you that I can share with an employee every day. I want to. I mean, if it's their job, they should just be doing it anyway, right? Well, sure, that's true. They should just be doing it anyway. But we should always appreciate everybody doing that job because it helps everybody else. It helps other people. And one of the things I tell people to do is you need to get your team working more closely together, not just in silos, but actually create a service culture where people are not competing, but trying to find ways to help each other, to serve each other in the team. And you do that by helping people each other does and needs from each other, and helping them to make commitments around those things. And I got a tool I'm going to mention at the end that will help with that. But it's a fairly simple thing. But it's the same kind of thing where leaders need to get to know their team members personally. They're not just an employee with a number and in a job, but it's a human being. They need to get to know their team members and understand what's important to them, and they should be able to thank them for an effort, or for their work, or for what they've accomplished, or for getting something done by a certain time, or whatever. It's amazing. I knew a guy. Well, I'm gonna go back to that pump company. Thought just popped into my head. There was a guy who needed the assemblers to put some special pumps together for him to take to a marketing show. sales show, and he had to have these things shipped, and these are huge. So it's a big deal. And I know some of the union guys laughed and said, that ain't never going to happen. Those guys do what they want to do when they want to do it. Well, this market guy was a really nice guy, and he walked down there and he said, hey guys, I'm in a bind. I'm new here. I just got this job, and I find out we got this show, and I know nobody's probably told you anything about it. And so you're not ready. And I need these things, some pumps ready, built, in the next 2 days. Is there any way that can happen? Is that even possible? Would you be willing to help me out with this? And at first they kind of were a little put out, but he pleaded with them, and he said, just tell me whatever you need from me. Well, they said, okay, they did it. They pulled together, they got it all done. He came down with he was just thrilled. He came down with a big old box of donuts, and he said, you guys are amazing. I wasn't sure anybody could do this, but you guys pulled it together. I know you worked some extra hours to do it, and I can't thank you enough. And I know these donuts don't mean a whole lot, but I had to give you something to let you know how much I appreciate it. I'll tell you, those guys would do anything for him, right? Anything. And the same thing happened in a mining company. I was working with these leaders, and one guy got up and talked about how his employees hated him. He didn't care because he hated them too. So he was fine with that. And he had this group of people that had to unload ore cars by hand. He had to unload material off these cars. I mean, it was hard work in the hot Arizona sun. And this guy said, the people were lazy. He had to be on them constantly. They wouldn't get the work done. And anyway, he transferred somewhere, and this new guy took over, and he saw how rough the job was and everything. And he'd go out there and he'd tell them, hey, you guys, you're doing a great job. Take a break. You're going to kill yourselves. So take a break. I brought you some cold drinks. Let's just sit in the shade for a little while. I know it's not a quote authorized break, but forget about that. This is hard work. And so he just treated them so much better, and they doubled productivity. Same group of guys, doubled productivity. He bought them lunch, and his boss complained to him and said, what are you wasting money buying those guys lunch for? And he said, he told his boss, he says, look, we've doubled productivity. Is that important? Do you not want that for the cost of a lunch? And besides, it's coming out of my pocket. It's not even coming out of my budget. So you can't complain. And so his boss let him be and let him work with his team. But, it's just people being people, right? It letting people know how much you appreciate them for what they do as a person, and appreciate them being part of the team. All those things are just so important to express. That they're far more important than a lot of the physical, tangible things that we talk about, like gift cards and basketball tickets. And as much as those things are nice, the personal touch means a lot.
I totally agree. I think people want to be seen, and they want to be acknowledged, not just for their output, but as a person.
Yeah.
And I'm go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, there was a company I worked with who used to spotlight teams that did something over over and above the norm, and created some great results, worked real hard. And they'd be in the company newsletter, they'd be spotlighted picture of all of them. That would go to their families, so their families would see them and see what they accomplished at work. And that meant a lot to people, because they felt like somebody really cared, that they were working hard and trying to do good things.
Yeah. And then Ted, I'm going to bring you in, because again, I think this is something that you're excellent at, as far as just allowing your people to be seen. So kind of talk to this from your vantage point.
Again, I try to have, relationships with all my people, and then try to, get an understanding, like, what is it that you want to achieve, like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, like, where are you trying to go? And then how can we get there together here? Mm-hmm. Again, trying to get them to be, invested in what we're doing. And, it's interesting. I have a kind of a team of, like, some really young adults, And, and this, in the past, I've had situations where I may have like one younger person, everybody else is more experienced and more senior.
Mm-hmm.
This has been the first time I've had more young, and how they're motivated is so different.
Yeah.
Like it's energy. Like some of the senior, but oh, that rah-rah doesn't necessarily work for them. Young, that works for them. Walking by, giving them a high five is a big deal for them. Just sudden outbursts of energy. They just love
Mm-hmm.
that type of stuff. And and it's interesting, I've heard them say, yeah, we're trying to get this done for Mr. Fails. I heard them say that, and I was like, man, like we all just want to do it for Mr. Fails.
Yeah.
Because we, and I say different little things to them sometimes where it's like, and I know a lot of them don't have a whole lot of experience or the education or whatever. And I tell them, I say, man, you guys, the company's never had this type of activity that we have now. And I said, and you guys don't even know what you're doing yet.
Mm-hmm.
Just think next year when you know what you're doing, man, the sky's the limit. And they just, that kind of stuff, they feed on that. It's not about, giving them any money or giving them anything. They're just, they're bought in, right? They feel valued. And I think that's a big thing is if you can get them to feel, people to feel valued, and appreciated, talk to them like, like human beings and stuff, and not like they're robots or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it goes a long way. And I always even think about, I think any high performing team, that leader has found a way to get to them, right? I just think you can, look, I need you to do this. I can jump up and down. I mean, I just think at some point, that's just not going to work. They're going to be stressed out and all that. Like I see these people, man, like they'll be working after hours. They'll be pulling themselves together on the weekends. I'm like, oh yeah, we had a meeting, we got together. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you guys doing that. I know you got other things going on. I just really appreciate that. And you just let them know.
That's such a great example.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that is the key, that whole engagement piece and really understanding how to connect with people. I mean, engagement is the big issue.
Yeah.
Right? If we can get better engagement, we get better performance. I mean,
and Ted's creating a system, an environment that enables high engagement.
Yep.
Right. It's a place where people are, and here's the difference. It's not about, see, a lot of people think it's all about holding people accountable. And that's where HR's messed up, where they always tell people, you want a high performing team, you've got to clarify expectations, hold people accountable. What does that mean? That means you manipulate people, you pressure them, but what Ted's describing is totally different, right? Ted is describing doing something that enables people to choose accountability. These people are choosing accountability. And why are they choosing accountability? Is because the environment has made that easy to do. And so they're choosing more commitment and to come in extra hours or to work together, pull together to get something done that they know is important. And they might say for Mr. Fowles, but the more they understand about the business overall and what it takes to succeed, the more they'll understand that as an overall team, that's their contribution, that they're like a sports team, and something goes wrong, people don't wait for someone else to pick up the ball. They know that we're all accountable for the success of the whole team. And so they step in and they do what needs to be done. So you're building a team that does that. Yeah. Great example. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Yep. Absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit before we come down the home stretch. Kevin, I'm just curious. I know you're on podcasts all the time, and you also have business people asking you all kinds of questions. What's one question you never get asked that you wish people would ask you?
I wish people would ask me, how do you know you're a great leader, and what's an easy way to learn to be a great leader? Nobody ever asks me those questions. I wish they would, because the answer to me is simple. One is the one about what does a great leader look like? It's somebody who has followers who willingly follow them. If you don't have people willingly following you, without coercion or without money, you're not really a leader. If you don't have followers, you're not a leader. You have nobody to lead. And the best way to learn, I think, one of the easiest ways, let me put it this way, one of the easiest ways to learn to be a great leader is to volunteer somewhere in a community organization where they have a group of volunteers that needs to be led by somebody who's not paid to do some important task for the organization or for the community. I think that's one of the best things that people can do, because you will learn that when you don't have any authority over people, when you don't have anything to hold over them, any power over them, they can just walk out anytime they want because they don't need the job, right? They're doing it because they want to be there. If you can lead that people to accomplish great things, you're going to be a great leader. You can lead anybody, right? That's one of the simplest ways to learn the principles that Ted was just sharing with us that he does in his organization. And because if you haven't done those sorts of things before, you're not sure how to do it. If you're going to succeed in the volunteer environment, you better learn it or you're going to fail.
Yeah, that is great. And that's why I have the utmost respect for pastors, because they're leading volunteer people for the most part.
Yep.
You have office staff, but most of the people are people you aren't paying.
Yep.
And that's why I have the utmost respect for the people that can motivate and inspire when you don't have the leverage of a paycheck to hold over people's head, like you said. Now that's great advice, and I hope somebody grabbed that and they're going to use that, because I just think that's the bottom line. I mean, the more effective you become as a leader, the easier things get for you, the better your performance gets. So great. Oh, thank you for sharing that. So we're now at the final segment. It's called Write This Down. And this is where we each go around and we give at least one final takeaway for the entrepreneurs who are listening and watching from this episode that they can write down so they can level up. So Kevin, you are the guest of honor. What should the people write down from this episode?
If you want to be a great leader, one of the first things you need to do is learn to serve people. Learn that your role as a leader is to build others' capacity to succeed. Make that priority number one. Build their capacity to contribute and their capacity to succeed. And there are a number of ways to do that. I'll just mention a couple of them. One is practice what we like to call ask, don't tell. In other words, start asking questions instead of dictating to people what they need to do. If there's a problem they bring to you, ask them questions, help them think through the problem and learn that process of thinking through it, and learn as a result of doing that some of the ways to solve that problem. They'll learn more about the business and it'll grow their capabilities for the future. So ask questions. Instead of just answering when someone has a question, ask a question back to help them figure it out as much as possible. And teach them, transfer your expertise as leader to them. So ask, don't tell is a pretty critical one, I think. Another is to focus on the success of the whole and teach everybody on the team to do that as well. If you're narrowly focused on a piece of the business or a particular responsibility or set of tasks, you can often do things that harm the rest of the organization without even realizing it. And sometimes people do because that's their accountability as they see it. And consequently, we have people working in silos, often competing against each other and hurting the business. And so you need to have people see themselves not as an accountant or an assembly line employee or whatever who just happens to work for ABC Business, but you're hiring an ABC business person who you want to focus on assembly or accounting or HR or whatever supply chain, whatever it is they need to do. That's what you're hiring. You're hiring bigger picture business people and who have an accountability to each other for the success of the whole. And to build that in your organization, you have to model it yourself. So I think that's a big piece.
Write that down.
Write that down.
Focus on the success of the whole. Ask, don't tell. Build their capacity. Man, write that down. All right, Ted.
That's tough. That's tough That's tough to follow. I think you have to like people.
Yeah.
I think you have to like people. I think you have to have no problem with, showing respect to people, no matter how big or how small their position is. One thing that I tell people, there's never a time that I go to a restaurant that I don't establish a relationship with whoever's serving. One, Kevin, because they're going to be going back to the kitchen and you're not going to see them back there. And if they drop that roll, you don't want them putting that back on your plate,
That's
right?
right.
So what I'm trying to do is make it a good experience. I'm gonna be like, hey, Eric, what's your name? What do you recommend on this menu? And man, and how are you doing? And and they feel good. They give you good service. You give them a nice tip. Everyone wins. So I'm looking for ways to make it so that everyone wins. And if you practice that, and just in all different situations, then when you're dealing with your team, right? You're dealing with your team. If someone's going through something they may have had a loss in the family. You're dealing with them and that they had a kid that, just the other day I had one of my staff, her son, I've known him since he was small, was having this high school graduation event, and they invited me. So I had to be there, right? I had to be there, right? Because I mean, that just shows, his mom, hey, I really appreciate everything that you do, and your family is you, right? I mean, so you're thinking about all those types of things, and you're not just a number,
Right.
in a company, and what you do really matters, because no matter how small the role is, if you're not there or that doesn't get done right, like the impact of that can be major. So
Yeah.
I think you have to like. I think you have to like people. I think you have to respect people. I think understand that everyone's job matters, right? No matter what that position is, because there could be a time that you need that individual for whatever. You could be locked out the building, and
Yeah.
that person that is the person that maybe the groundskeeper has a key to let you back in on a weekend. So if you so you want to be like, hey, Joe, how you doing? I locked myself. Oh, hey, okay, Ted, Joe, I'll let you in. I just think that if you do that, it's all about people,
It is.
right? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's all about people.
It is. And it's a great point. I appreciate you mentioned that because one of the best ways to get to know people is to ask questions, ask them
Yeah,
about themselves, right? If we just take the time to do that, we will find that everybody has a story and we'll learn to appreciate them more. If we
yeah,
just take time to get to know them personally, we'll appreciate them more and we'll be better able to show them that appreciation and build that relationship. It's all about
absolutely.
people. You're absolutely right.
So write that down, right?
Yeah,
Like
write
people.
it down.
Damn.
Yeah, Ted, I tend to agree with you. I just think as a leader, you have a hard time if you don't like people. Eventually, it's going to catch up with you.
It's gonna catch up.
Mhm.
It's going to catch up and cause you problems.
You
Like
know, like
people. Go ahead.
yeah. Yeah, anytime I hear someone that's like, "Oh yeah, heads are gonna roll," people know how I do it. Like that's not the way you want to be. You don't want to be that person. You
Yeah.
want them to really, you want to, again, want to perform for you.
You
Yeah.
have some of the people who watch the show I know are clergy, and I'm sure this is easier for them than probably a lot of other people because they focus on um, trying to see people as God sees them, right? That's kind of
Mhm.
their focus of attention, and I think that principle applies to everyone, even if you're an atheist. I mean, you can say, if I try to see people the way somebody, even if I don't believe in a all-knowing, all-loving God, how would he see or she see that person? What should I be looking for? And how does that influence how I interact with them? I think we all did that. We'd certainly be a lot better leaders. We'd work with people sometimes quite a bit differently.
Just practicing gratitude.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just practicing from the smallest thing. If someone holds the door open for you going into a building, hey, stop and hey, sir, man, I really appreciate that. Oh, they're like, no problem. Really, no, thank you. Like it's, those types of things, and you take that back into your office environment, and you take that everywhere. I mean, it's still the same person that opened the door for you is the same person that worked for you. And if they do something, because you feel some kind of way if you open the door for someone and then they don't say thank you.
Yeah.
Right. You're like, man, I stood here and held the door open. You just walked on through like that was my job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you think if I'm that way in that situation, how do you think I'm going to be if that person works for me and they do something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, for sure. So my piece for this has to do with Kevin and I were talking backstage. I saw this video from Simon Sinek, right? The Start With Why guy and all of that. So he said he was at this hotel, and the guy was just giving him just this outrageous level of service. I mean, just going the extra mile, just like almost reading his mind. And he says to the guy, "Man, you are outstanding. Are you just always like this?" And the guy says, "No, actually, I work for another hotel, actually a hotel down the street, part-time, and I'm the total opposite because the culture over there is so toxic and the boss is just so negative. My goal when I go over there is just to do my job and go home. That's it. I don't do anything extra. What here is totally different." So my takeaway from that is that engagement starts with the leader. And it's not just because we think, like we talked about earlier, oh, these people just don't want to do this, do that. I think you first have to look in the mirror as the leader. And I think you have to ask yourself, what am I doing to motivate that type of response from the employee? So I just think that's critical. Engagement starts with leadership, and the engagement starts with culture. So make sure you write that down, and we're doing everything we can to have a more engaged team. So, Kevin, thank you again for everything that you've shared. I know you've got a special offer. I'll give you time now to talk about that. How can the people connect with you?
I try to simplify your URL for people because sometimes when I'm on a podcast, they can't see anything. They're just on a commute and they have to remember it. So I came up with superchargemyteam.com. So if you go to superchargemyteam.com, you'll go to the Ascent Management Consulting website. And there's a page there where you can get that tool that I talked about, where you can use that to bring your team together, create a service culture, get them working together, collaborating better. And it'll walk you through a step-by-step process for doing that. So superchargemyteam.com, you can access articles that we've written for leadership articles and other materials there as well.
All right. Superchargemyteam.com, and we'll definitely put this link in the show notes as well so people can access that. So Kevin Herring, thank you again for everything that you've shared. This has been a fantastic episode. By the way, speaking of sharing, don't forget to share the show.
Share the show.
Don't keep great information a secret. And then don't forget to subscribe because, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all those places where you consume content. Don't forget to subscribe to the 30-Minute Hour podcast. That way you never miss another episode. So that's our time for this week. Thank you again to Kevin Herring. And until next time, have a great one.
Thank you.